All right, wake up, pre-health sharks. It is time for another edition of our Wake Up Pre-Health Sharks webinar. So we have a very exciting option today for you guys on learning about what an EMT is. We're going to be talking about paramedics. But before we dive too deep, I want to get a chance to introduce all of our experts. My name is Emilio Lorenzo. I'm the Associate Director of Employee Relations.
Hi guys, my name is Gabby Gross and I'm an Excel Career Advisor in the Office of Career Development.
And hello everybody, my name is Daniela Caracas Suarez. I go by Danny the Machine, and I'm also a Career Advisor in the Office of Career Development.
And today,
my name is Sean Rowling here. I'm going to be speaking on what it was like to be an EMT.
awesome, Sean. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm so happy to bring in Sean. He is a good friend of mine and someone I worked a lot with in the Veteran Resource Center as a U.S. Navy veteran, and now he works at a nonprofit, The Mission Continues. So I'll let him give a brief introduction of some of his own experiences and what he's doing now.
Yeah, thank you. So again, my name is Sean Rowling. As Danny said, I was in the Navy for 4 years. I was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia, working at a helicopter squadron. Got out of the Navy. Decided I wanted to do something that was still a little, high adrenaline, high stress type job. So I thought EMT would be the route to take. So I did that for a while. Did it for about 2.5 years or so, and then started switching my focus back to schooling, and then started working towards my undergrad, which I did here at NSU. And then now I'm working on my graduate degree in cybersecurity management, working full-time with a veterans nonprofit called The Mission Continues, where I manage their learning management systems database.
So, Sean, thank you for that short bio. And I know we're going to be putting you on the hot seat soon and asking you all these questions. Something that you get a lot from students, especially pre-health students, get so hard to get hands-on experience in healthcare. And EMT is one of these unique experiences where not only lets you work and with patients, but it really challenges you to think on your feet. Before we dive too much into your experiences, we want to just introduce the topic and the industry of being an EMT. So for those of you who don't know, an EMT is a specially trained medical technician certified to provide basic emergency services before and during transportation to the hospital. So you've seen a lot of them in those ambulances on the scene. They rapidly evaluate a patient's condition and maintain airway, breathing, and circulation by using CPR defibrillation. So all of them are BLS, basic life support certified. They aim to control external bleeding, prevent shock, prevent further injury, or disability by immobilizing potential spine or other bone fractures. So again, on the scene, assessing and doing some of the main areas that we just talked about in terms of the breathing, the CPR, and Sean's going to help us bring this to life a little bit more. We also wanted to talk a little bit about the differences between EMT and a paramedic. I'm going to turn it over to Gabby to see her thoughts on this. And Sean, if you have any thoughts on the difference between EMT, please don't don't hold back from sharing your insight.
So thanks, Emilio. So we wanted to discuss a little bit about the differences between an EMT and a paramedic. I know even myself, I get confused a lot of the time and I think that they're the same thing. So I'm sure that students who are tuning in also may feel the same. But they are different in many different ways, specifically the level of education and really the procedures that they're allowed to perform. I know that EMTs, it really takes about 6 months to gain that certification and become an EMT, but with paramedics, it takes about a year to 2, really depending on the state, to start, in that profession. EMTs can administer CPR, glucose, and oxygen, whereas paramedics can really perform more complex, more intense procedures, I'd like to say, such as inserting IV lines, administering drugs, and applying pacemakers. Paramedics can also resuscitate patients who have had heart attacks or other trauma, whereas EMT cannot, and I'm sure Sean can talk a little bit about that. But both EMTs and paramedics can be dispatched to respond to an emergency in the ambulance. So how I'm understanding this is that they really work together to help a patient in distress. Emilio, Sean, Danny, anyone have any other thoughts about the differences?
Okay.
I think that actually covers a lot of it. I know that there are differences per state too. So, for example, in California, where I was certified, we weren't allowed to draw blood even for a blood sugar draw. Not even we couldn't draw any kind of blood at all, not even a finger prick. But if you're in middle of Colorado where there's larger distance between the hospitals, then the EMTs can start an IV. And in places like Colorado where hospitals are a lot further apart. So it really depends on where you are locally too.
Wow, I never even really thought about that, Sean, about the distances between the hospital affecting what you can do as an EMT and paramedic. That's really actually fascinating. But I
Yeah,
think a lot of the points, I think the education and the procedures they can do, but the fact that they can work hand in hand together. But yeah, I think both really good points. But Sean, what you mentioned, I never really even thought about before, that spread of distance between the hospitals, increasing what you could do as an EMT on the scene. So, all right. So I think we got a good basis of what an EMT is, differences between an EMT and a paramedic. I think now we get into a little bit sharing or gaining insights from Sean on his experiences as an EMT. So I'll turn it over to one of our experts and we'll jump into our questions for the day.
Yeah, so I can start us off putting Sean, like Amelia said, on the hot seat. So with question number one, so Sean, what was the process like to gain the EMT certification and training in order to get hired, especially that California process like you were talking about?
Right. And it is a process, and it definitely depends on, as I said earlier, like where you are. So for me, for my specific like training pipeline, there are, as you said, they're typically 6-month courses that are part-time so that you can do school or you can have a job and kind of work on the side. The route I took was a full-time 3-month course. And so it was Monday to Saturday, I think 8 or 9-ish hours a day for 3 months. And then once you're done with that training, then you aren't even certified, but you're able to take the certification exam. And so for California, I took the California state specific exam. Once I passed that, I was eligible to take the national exam, and that's sort of what makes you competitive if you have a state specific certification and a national certification, because it just is a wider, it's casting a wider net for taking the national exam. Because on the San Diego test, they're not going to ask you for an EMT certification about, as I said earlier, blood glucose sampling, because it's not something you can do per the protocol for San Diego County. But on a national exam, they're going to ask you that, and they're going to ask you stuff about IV insertion, in theory, how you would do it, because if you're in a place like Colorado, you may have to start an IV line. So the training is anywhere from 3 to 6 months, and then certification is just there's a written test and then a practical side of the test, where you actually have to perform skills in front of a board of people for both the state and the national certification. And then the getting hired part, in San Diego, it was very easy because it's a very saturated market. And so, which you would think would not be the case, but because it's so saturated, there are so many private ambulance companies that are, popping up to hop on that train. And so for my situation, there was a private ambulance company that came in to our class, and they just said, we're looking for more EMTs. So we thought we'd reach out to the schools. If you're interested, here's our company, here's what we're about. Stop by anytime and we'll talk about the next steps. And so I was like, okay. So I went right there that day after class and walked in. They asked me I hadn't even taken any of my exams yet, not my state or national. And they conditionally hired me pending I passed both of those exams. But I went in, they asked me questions that were, of course, fresh in my mind because I was still in school. And then they went through a practical exam. And then, as I said, they conditionally hired me. And then once I proved them I had my state national certification, I started the next day. And I had everything already done up until then. So I was just waiting on that certification.
Wow, that was a fast process. And I had no idea that in those trainings that they actually brought in recruiters sometimes to hire from the group of students studying. So that's, I think, for our pre-health students tuning in, that'll be helpful for them to know they can either look into expedited 3-month programs or take their time. So thanks for that information. All right, so we'll go into question 2. So what are the necessary characteristics and attributes that make a successful EMT?
I like this question because when you think about when you call 911, what do you want? Who do you want to show up to your house? You want someone, of course, who's professional. You want someone, of course, who's knowledgeable, who's compassionate, who's going to listen to what you're saying and not just steamroll through your house and control what's going on and then leave. Like, you want someone who has all these things, and so you have to really, to be successful as an EMT, you have to ask yourself, who would you want coming to your house when you are in that time of extreme? If you activate 911, you're in a situation where you have no idea what to do. You're literally calling someone for help. And so you have to be that person that you want coming to your house to help you. And so in your own mind, imagine who that person would be coming to save you, and be that person. And then share that mindset with who you're working with, whoever you're, because it's always in groups. You're always buddied with one or two other people on your team. So share that with whomever you're working with. Share that same mindset. And when you guys, or when the two EMTs would go into the on scene, you're gonna just carry a lot more confidence in how you're working, because you're being the person that you both want to be if 911 was called, if you're the one to call 911. So that's all I really would have to say to that, is just be the person you would want to have come to your house when you need them most.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I really love that, because that's something we tell a lot of our students too. Many of them, they want to go to professional school or med school or whatever it may be. And we tell them some of the biggest things to build are those soft skills where you can build relationships with your patients and make them feel comfortable. So yeah, I think that's critical. And then for question number 3, what should someone know before deciding to become an EMT?
What I like to tell people who ask me about, what it's like, is that it's extremely fun. It's incredibly rewarding. As you kind of move up and through it, because you see the path of, you're an EMT, you really like it, you advance through it, now you're a medic. And then if you really like it and you want to do more of it and do the more intense stuff, you go like into a flight medic, or you go the firefighter route and you're a fire medic. It's a really fun progression, because you go from it's when you get into like the private companies versus the city contracted companies. So you go from, if you're a private company, you aren't getting 911 calls, you're getting like the life alert slip and falls, you're getting the nursing facility calls, you're getting the inter-hospital or intercity transport calls. Not what you aren't getting the calls that you imagine when you think, I'm going to be an EMT. You're getting the calls to the dialysis centers, to the cancer hospitals, you're getting the psych facilities, you're getting those calls. As you work your way up and you get to a 911 contracted company, like a city company. So for here, I think in Florida, it's I think American Medical Response or something is the company that has the city contract now, or the local city medics. You start getting the 911 stuff where it's, help, I'm stuck here, or so-and-so's been hurt. You just start seeing a progression of a certain kind of call to a different kind of call. And then when you're at the flight medic route, it's always the gnarly accidents, or the people lost, or hurt in the woods somewhere. Like, it's always the super intense stuff. So it's incredibly rewarding to say you go the flight medic or the fire medic route or the paramedic route, to kind of reflect back on the process to get you there. And so it's fun in that sense. Also, literally every day is different. I don't think it's possible to have a same day as an EMT, because you never know what's going to happen. Everything is different with everybody every day. So that's one thing I like the most about it. As I mentioned earlier, it's important to know that different states have different, in different counties within the state, all have different rules for what you can and can't do. And for every area, you actually tried to find it, I couldn't find mine. There's a little EMT handbook, a little flip book, a spiral book for your county that shows you basically what you can and can't do. And it's just a step-by-step for pretty much every situation you would be in. But know that going in, and then also know it's important to know that it's very high adrenaline, very high stress. And so it's super important to be aware mentally of how you're doing, because you only see bad stuff all day. And so it can be hard. And you will also see things that you will never forget. You'll see calls involving kids, involving babies. You'll see a lot of things that you won't ever forget. And that's something you have to be okay with going in. And most people know that, but most people don't really know how they're going to actually handle those situations. They expect to see them, but it's hard to know how you will react in that situation until you're in that situation.
Yeah,
And that's
No, go ahead, Emilio.
these experiences the most, John, is just because it really puts you in those settings that it's either fight or flight. And a lot of people say, oh, I want to work in healthcare. I want to become a doctor. I want to do this, do that. But if you've never really experienced or seen blood or seen an emergency situation, you really don't know how you're going to react to that. And obviously you get more accustomed to it, but that initial experience really helps you understand, is this something that I want to get myself into and learn how to adapt to?
Right.
So, Sean, kind of switching gears a little bit, speaking of experiences, can you tell me about your most memorable or rewarding experiences in EMT thus far?
Yeah. So this was a call that I still actually think about every now and then, especially when this particular song comes on, which I'll go into. But I had a patient, and I was at the time I was going to be the driver. So we switch off every other call. You're either the patient person or you're the driver. And so when you're the driver, your job is to just assist the patient person in any way that you can. And so the way that I would assist when I was doing it is I would check out the scene. I would kind of see, what happened. Like, you're walking into it. What are the first impressions? And then writing all that down. I'm getting the initial vitals. I'm talking to the patient. I'm talking to this gentleman's wife, and what happened? Tell me about it. While my other partner that I'm working with is talking to the actual patient. And basically, what had happened was it was a slip and fall, potentially broken bones. It was a through and through a BLS call, basic life support. This guy is not bleeding, might have some bones. He can walk, but it's needs assistance. Go check it out. That was our call. So we get there, we're talking with him and stuff. And long story short, we end up kind of having some laughs about the way that he had slipped and fell. It was just, he was like, I don't remember the exact circumstances, but he was just being a goob and like dancing around and fell. Like it was something like that. And which I found super relatable, because I feel like I myself am very much that way. And so we kind of had a laugh about it. He is in pain. If I remember correctly, it was a potential hip fracture or something. So he could walk, but with assistance. He was in a lot of pain. And you could tell that he was trying to hide the pain. And so we just kept kind of joking around to kind of get his mind off it. His wife kept giving him a hard time about being old, because he wasn't at all old. He was in his 40s, I think. So she kept calling him grandpa. But we get into the ambulance, and I get up front, and the wife asks, is there a radio back here? Can we turn the radio on? I'm like, yeah, but it's up here, and I'll just turn it up really loud so you can hear it. So I turn on the radio, and the song Budapest by George Ezra comes on, if you've heard that song. And I turn it on. I turn it up a little louder than what I would typically, because I like the song. And then I hear laughter from the back, and the wife is like looking up at me and kind of like smiling. And I ask what's going on. She goes, he always likes to sing the song in the shower, and then he would run out of the shower naked and chase her through the house and try to get her to sing that song too. And so they both started laughing about it. He started singing it, and then I challenged her, like, now you have to sing it. He's always asking you to sing it. He literally has broken bones in an ambulance. Like, you have to sing it with him. And so they both started singing it, and then I joined in and started singing it with them. And then the patient person, who was very reluctant to start singing, but he ended up starting singing too. And we just kind of sang that song until it was done. And then it was one of those moments where it's like, man, it would be cool if we got to the hospital right when the song ended, but we of course didn't. And so it was a little awkward after that. But it really like established a better sense of connection to the human, to the human. I mean, you so often as an EMT are just, you go to a call, someone's hurt, control bleeding, transport, go to the scene, figure out what's wrong, transport. And you don't necessarily forget that you're dealing with parents, with grandparents, with brothers, sisters, but sometimes you do, because your focus is to get them to the hospital alive. That's an EMT's job, is to get a patient to the hospital alive. And so you get caught up in that. So when this situation happened, it really kind of made me think, wow, like this is someone's parents. This is someone's brother that's hurt right now, or, someone's uncle. And I think I don't think I'll ever forget that, just because it was incredibly impactful. And it really, from that point on, kind of made me really put a lot more care to all the patients I had. Not to say I didn't, obviously, not to say I, of course, didn't care about my patients, but I started treating patients as if they were my family. And that gave me a lot better sense and pride in my work. And so I think that's something that I'll always remember from being an EMT.
That's great, Sean. That was a great story to share. So on the flip side of that, we know, and you've already talked about some of these difficult settings that EMT brings. What were some of the challenging moments you experienced, and what did you learn from them as an EMT?
So challenging, there's physically challenging and there's emotionally challenging and mentally challenging. I would say physically challenging is where I think those are the most common challenges that you would get as an EMT. So I've had calls where I had to break a toilet because a patient was stuck between the tub and the toilet. I've had calls where I had to break a door frame because the patient couldn't fit through the door. I've had to carry patients out of windows and over bushes. And I've had to, you are in so many weird situations. Like, you get into so many weird situations, which what makes it fun, but it can be very, very physically challenging, especially when say you have a patient who weighs a lot. You have to, if they weigh over a certain amount, you can't pick them up with just two people. So you have to call backup. And there were several regular patients that I can remember where we always need to call for a lift assist, or we had to bring a special ambulance with a tow cable and a motor to pull them into the ambulance. It was physically very, very demanding. Situations you never think you would ever be in your life, you're put in as an EMT. Mentally challenging is just the calls, because you have to know exactly what to do when you get there, because reverting back to the other question, what are some successful skills or, characteristics of an EMT, is you have to be that EMT that they want when they call you. You have to know what you're doing. So the whole way there, the call comes up on the screen. It might have, sometimes it would just say slip and fall. And that's all the details that we would get. And we're like, okay, did they fall on something? You have to start thinking of how the injury happened. You have to think of, what did they land on? Did they turn a certain way? Like, how were their bones, when they fell? Like, are they on blood thinners? Like, there's so many questions you have to kind of mentally think through before you get on scene, to where the right questions to ask to get to the answers you want in the most time efficient way possible, because you don't want to be on scene for any more than 10 minutes tops. Usually it's 5 minutes or less that you want to be on scene. You want to be transporting quick. And then emotionally challenging, I would say, is, as I mentioned earlier, calls with children or folks with dementia. Those calls were really hard, or any kind of severe Alzheimer's or any sort of psychological disorder that they may have. Those calls are really, really hard. I can very distinctly remember a call. It was a mother and a daughter. The mother was, I believe, in her 80s or maybe 90s, and she was just, all she kept saying was, I wish my daughter was here. I really wish my daughter could be here. And her daughter was sitting right next to her. She didn't recognize her daughter sitting right next to her. And the daughter's just sitting there crying because she wants her mom to know that her daughter's there for her. And her mom just didn't recognize her own daughter. It's like, that kind of stuff is really hard to see. And when you really are passionate about something you do, you can't help but get, emotionally, not really attached, but involved, with the patients you have, because you see them as people. You're seeing them as people. It's someone's grandma, it's someone's mom. So there are all kinds of different challenges to being an EMT, and those are just some of them.
It's a great insight, Sean. Thank you for sharing.
All right. Thanks, Sean, so far for being really honest and raw with us. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure the students that are tuning in also appreciate it. So next question, what were some of the top skills that you feel you gained from working as an EMT?
I think I've touched on this too throughout the questions. I think it gave me a lot more patience with people in general. It allowed me to, or sort of taught me to better prioritize or triage in the non-medical sense of the word, just life, because as I've said, you only see people in these very unfortunate situations. So when you go home to your nice house or nice apartment, or even decent house or decent apartment, and you have food in the fridge and you're healthy and you're able to walk around without pain, like those are things that you start to really appreciate more, because all you see all day are people less fortunate than you are at that time. You only see people who are hurt, who are in a situation they need help, whether that's physically or mentally. So it really taught me to just be more patient with people in general, to be more understanding. I think it taught me to be a better listener, because that's all you kind of do as an EMT, is you listen and observe. And it taught me to appreciate what I have.
Thank you so much for sharing all that. All right, so our last question for you, what advice do you have for students who are interested in becoming an EMT?
Do ride-alongs. They have a ride-along program, as far as I know, at pretty much any firehouse or ambulance company. When I was first interested in being an EMT, that's what I did. I lived in Norfolk, Virginia at the time, or Virginia Beach at the time, and there was a volunteer. Virginia Beach's emergency medical system, firefighters, EMTs are 100% volunteer. The transport is at no cost to the patient, which I thought was a really cool system, and I was lucky to live right there. And so I reached out to them. I think I just showed up and asked if they had like a ride-along program, and they said no, or they said, yeah, you can do one ride-along every year, every half year or something. And I explained my situation, said I'm thinking about looking into being an EMT, just got out of the military. I think it's a career path I'd really enjoy. Is there any chance I could do it more than once every half year or once a year? And they said no again. But they later came back and said, yeah, you can do more, but you have to sign some paperwork, whatever. Long story short, ride-alongs. You get and do as many of them as you can, because you'll see, every day is different. You might have a day where you don't do anything. There might be a day where you don't have a single call, which is great. Or there might be a day where it's call after call after call, or they're all just really, really bad calls. It's just a bad day. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to see that before you're fully invested in the career path, and it doesn't cost anything. And a lot of times they let you help out in ways that they initially had maybe said you couldn't help out. So in my situation, they just said, don't touch anything. Cause I'm just a guy off the streets to them. So they're like, don't touch anything. You absolutely can never touch a patient, which I never did, but mm-hmm. You can't help with anything. You're just eyes and ears only. But I started working, they let me do ride-alongs with them 4 days a week. And so I got to be pretty known with them. And so after a couple months of doing that, they let me, like, their gurneys were all, or their stretchers, their gurneys were all like power operated. So they started letting me control the up and down on the gurney. They started letting me take blood pressure, and like vital signs and stuff. And they even got me a shirt and pants to wear, like EMT pant, like cargo pants. And they got me a little kit, and I had my own little setup, and I was just a guy volunteering with them, and they like really made me like the field a lot. And so I recommend that to anybody. Just reach out and ask. Even if they don't have a program, it never, ever, ever hurts to just ask or just show up. I've found that that's a very successful way of getting yourself out there and seeing if you can make something happen. And just show up and, show that you're being genuine, show that you're interested. And a lot of times they'll see that passion, and they'll let you do a ride along or something.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. I actually never knew about ride-alongs. I don't know if Emilio and Danny knew about that for EMT. So that's great. And I want to also thank you real quick before Emilio kind of wraps us up. just about being so honest and raw, with all of these questions, and sharing your own personal experiences. I'm sure students can take a lot from this, and they can see that persistence really is key, especially with this this position.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to reiterate what you said, Sean, thanks for being so honest, sharing your insights, and helping us learn a lot of different things. Because this guy, man, I didn't know about the ride along, and being able to get an inside look from someone that's experienced being an EMT was really helpful for us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sean, for tuning in. And I love how you talked about a lot of the hard moments, but you always started out with saying like it's such a fun experience every day, something new. So I like how you really talked about both sides. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me. It was fun to talk about.
And thank you all for joining us or listening to this recording. Once again, Wake Up Prio Sharks is our monthly webinar. Every month we tackle different topics. Today we got a great guest speaker talking about the EMT, but we always have great topics. You could always find all of our recordings on our YouTube channel, NSU Career Development. But thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to having you in our next session.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.